You're live.
Hi everybody, I'm here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm here with one of my heroes, Dr. Jim O'Connell. Dr. Jim O'Connell is the guy who started the Vulnerability Index. He works in Boston with homeless healthcare. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. Actually, talk about heroes. I've got to start here, but yeah, I started working on the streets in 1985 with several of our friends at the Healthcare for the Homeless program in Boston. And we realized that we had a lot of people coming into shelters, but the group that stayed outside were really very vulnerable, wonderful, extraordinary people, but really outside in the elements and exposed. And as we got to know more about them and get to know them, we realized that they also suffered from a ton of really serious medical problems. So Stephen Wong, who's one of our doctors, he was this incredible doctor who's now working up in Toronto, and I still think of Stephen as the hero in this. He's really one of the premier researchers on homelessness. But he looked at 20-some thousand homeless people that had come through our clinics and decided to look at their death rate and why they were dying. And what we found, much to our surprise, is that the death rate was extraordinarily high, but people were dying of things like cancer and cirrhosis. They were dying of heart disease. AIDS was a big factor. And we realized that the people that were living outside were dying of really serious medical problems, that they were very vulnerable. And they were dying in numbers that were just extraordinary. As a doctor, I've been working at Mass General for a long time. I take care of a lot of people, but in my practice, it was very few who died in any given year. And all of a sudden, I was taking care of homeless people, and hundreds were dying each year. Wow. So Stephen did from his study, and then we did another study from an outbreak of deaths that occurred on the streets of Boston back in 1998 and 99, and with Dr. Howard Koh, who was then the Commissioner of Public Health in Boston, in Massachusetts. We looked at why people were dying. We found that, as we all know now, that if you're struggling with a real major medical problem and also trying to struggle with a severe and persistent mental illness, and often complicated by struggling with a substance that's trying to go, that combination, what we've come to call trimorbidity, for lack of a better word, we're looking for a better word, is the one that marked people who were extraordinarily vulnerable outside. So the index, I think, was something that Common Ground took that research. We had never thought of it as an index, but they used that study from Stephen and our group to then parlay what I think is a pretty interesting vulnerability index. And we're still, as I watch it around the country, I'm both fascinated and interested in knowing how it all works out. The bottom line, though, is people who are living on the streets of our urban cities are very vulnerable. I used to think of them as the survivors, but in fact, their death rate, as we now know, is higher than any other subgroup we know in America.
Wow, wow. So we're here in Albuquerque, and you're about to speak for a boot camp for 100,000 homes. Yeah. Tell me about that. What's going on with this 100,000 homes? And
well, I think it's just like meeting people like you is extraordinary. Living in Boston and working in there, I was stunned to see that Common Ground, and then it was galvanizing this movement across the country to do what I thought was just impossible. I'd say nobody's going to house 100,000 people. Right. But what they've done is they've hit a nerve, I think. They've changed the public perception from just a group of nondescript people to personalizing it. And I think what you learn, certainly if you're working as a doctor in this world, it's the relationship that really begins to make a difference. And what I think they've done that's extraordinary, and I hope many other cities will grab on, is you get to know who the people are outside. You're not just housing a group of veterans, you're housing Joe, and you're housing someone who you know. And I've watched now in several cities that when the volunteers go out and all of a sudden this becomes a real problem, it's really extraordinary. So I'm honored to be here.
How do people get in touch with you? Say if somebody wants to learn more, do you have a website?
We have our Healthcare for the Homeless program has a website. It's bhchp.org. But my email, you could always email me. I'm just joconnell@bhchp.org, and I'm always interested in what's going around and would love to help.
Well, great.
Okay,
it's an honor.
Mark, it's an honor to see you because you're my hero.
We'll keep on sending some updates here from the 100,000 Homes Boot Camp, and we're actually going to go out and do the registry.